Hey dreamers, welcome back to your Dream Coach podcast, where we talk about what it really takes to build a business, a mission, and a life you love from the inside out. I'm your host, Shayla Wey, and today we're diving into a topic I've seen play out in almost every industry, every level of leadership, and every growth season. And that's why people quit and what to do about it. So whether it's clients, team members, even you thinking about giving up on something you once believed in, quitting is a real part of entrepreneurship. And it can feel discouraging when you're leading people and you see them walk away from the dream, or worse, when you feel like walking away yourself. And I want you to know that there are patterns to why people quit. And there are also tools, truths, and shifts that can help you lead people through that quitting point. And so they rise instead of retreat. And so I'm walking you through today 8 powerful reasons why people quit and what I have found to be the antidotes to each one. So these lessons come from the front lines of coaching, business building, and leading through the tough moments. So let's go there. Well, the first one I want to kick off with is people quit when they don't see results fast enough. So let's be honest. We live in a world of quick wins. We are sold the overnight success, 5K in 5 days, and highlight reels of other people crushing it. So when someone shows up, puts in some effort, and doesn't get a win right away, discouragement hits fast. And so what I've found is that people often quit not because they're lazy, but because they weren't prepared for the reality of the timeline. And so the shift is we just need to normalize the pace of real growth. Celebrate progress over perfection, and show people how compounding effort works. And for yourself, remember that consistent action beats occasional intensity. I often always will use that phrase: when expectations don't meet reality, people are disappointed. And so whether it is a client, whether it is an employee, even for ourselves, is are we being realistic with our expectations so that we aren't disappointed and that we can normalize, right, the pace of the real growth. The second is people will quit when they feel alone. And this is a big one. And I've seen this in my clients, teammates, and even myself, is when the support fades, the doubt creeps in. Isolation is one of the fastest paths to quitting. And because you don't have anyone reminding you that your dream is possible, and it's easy to talk yourself out of it. I actually was just on a coaching call earlier today with a client who's in the process of really starting a business over these last few months. And we just had a conversation around this, about why coaching matters, especially in a situation like this, because when you're your own business and you're an entrepreneur and you're also your only employee at the time, is we don't necessarily have someone reminding us. And so as her coach, I was able to remind her of, this is why you started this in the first place. And this is why when sometimes the coaching calls, we don't feel necessarily prepared for them, is when they actually make the biggest impact, right? Because it's easy to talk yourself out of it. And so what I found is that community really creates accountability, and it gives people a mirror of what's possible. So if you're building a business, build the community alongside it. If you're leading others, check in before they go dark. And if it's you that's feeling alone, reach out, right? This isn't a solo sport. And that's why there's communities and, different opportunities, regardless of what category you're in, that you can get the support, because there's somebody that's going through something similar or has been through something similar that can help really lead us through that. The third one that I have that I wrote down was people quit when their why isn't deep enough. Motivation will fade when it's built on surface reasons. So if someone's building a business just to make money or just to prove someone wrong, they'll run out of fuel when it gets hard. And so this is probably one of my favorite things to dive deep with when I coach people, is the why. And there's a phrase that I learned when I was in direct sales from one of my mentors, is when your why has heart, your how finds legs, right? Your how finds a way. And I've just, we're all motivated so differently. And so what I found is that people who stay in it long term are deeply connected to something more meaningful. And in leadership, we often try to lead people the same way we want to be led. And especially with some of the CEOs and owners that I coach, entrepreneurs, they'll often try to lead people the way that they want to be led or the way that they're motivated. And what's interesting is that in leadership is that we have to really recognize that not everyone is motivated by the same things. Some people are motivated, strictly by promotions or by finances. Some people are motivated by flexibility or making an impact. Some people are motivated by fulfillment, right? We're motivated by different things. And so I have an example of a client. She, was offered more money when really she actually just wanted an extra day off a month. So instead of having the raise, she traded that out for time, because for her, that's what was keeping her motivated, is to be able to get one day off a month in the middle of the week. That was her day. And that was more meaningful to her than just having more money at the end of the year. So when we help people reconnect with their deeper why, not just what do you want, but even deeper, why does this matter? Who does this impact? What's at stake if you quit? When the mission is real, quitting isn't an option. And I often say for myself, just, running my own business, is that when my life is just as exciting outside of the business, or in fact, even more exciting outside of my business than it is in my business, that's when I'm at my best, because I'm working for my reasons, obviously not just to pay bills, because, we need to do that, but for things that are exciting outside, in my personal life, right? The fourth one is people quit because they don't feel good enough. Now, imposter syndrome is something that I've talked about time and time again. I talk to pretty much every coaching client and strategy client that I have about this, because we really are our own limiting beliefs, right? Sometimes the most talented people I've coached are the closest to quitting because they were so caught up in comparison, self-doubt, or perfectionism. I've been there multiple times in my life. Anytime I've sort of ripped off a Band-Aid and tried something new, I've gone to that place. Am I really good enough? Can I really make this work? What will people think? But the reality is as I've shared too, is imposter syndrome is really just the being a beginner. And we get so caught on our, in our own mindset of what other people think, especially with social media and just things that we see out there. But I will tell you, from the thousands of people I've worked with, that we are in our heads way too much, first and foremost, but the other people around you don't actually even really care that much, right? We make those stories up so much more in our head. And I'm not saying that they don't care because they don't like you or appreciate you, but everyone is busy. Everyone's got their own things that they're worrying about, that for someone to take the brain power to worry about you is really most likely not happening. And going back to the why, is that if you do have that why, then none of those things matter. I think back to when I first started my coaching business, and the imposter syndrome I felt is, did I have the skills? And even when I started the first episode of the podcast, is I didn't even know how to record one. And I was like, I just got to start somewhere, because everybody that gets to a certain place in life starts being new. And that's the whole imposter syndrome. So if we don't feel good enough, okay, and as we know, is what I found, is that self-belief is a muscle. And if people haven't built it, they'll default to quitting over failing, because failing doesn't feel good sometimes. So we want to reframe that to normalize struggle, normalize being a beginner, celebrate resilience as much as you celebrate wins. As I was going through my journey in direct sales, this is something that I feel like we did really well, is we celebrated the good, the bad, the ugly, and the progress, because it's not always necessarily the end that you're, obviously you have the end goal, but it's not necessarily the trophy or the raise or the promotion or that really matters. It's who you became in the process. And so if you're somebody that can normalize being a beginner and embrace the suck a little bit, right? Pause and ask yourself, if this is this actually not for me, or am I just scared I won't do it perfectly? There's a really special place in life that we can get to when we embrace vulnerability. And I remember hitting that point in my leadership when I could just really own mistakes, or I could just be real. And didn't mean that I cared less and I wasn't excited, but I was able to connect people at a whole other level when they didn't see me in a light as everything was perfect or everything was right. And it actually made me more relatable. So I challenge you that embracing being a beginner, embracing the vulnerability of resilience could really help your commitment of not wanting to give up so soon. Number 5 is people will quit when they don't have a clear path. So confusion can lead to inaction. And so this is why so much of my coaching with top leaders will be focused on a 1, 3, 5 year vision, because as a leader, we need to lead people, which means we can't just be a week ahead or a month ahead. We have to be speaking into the future of where we're going, because people, as much as they want, a paycheck and they want to be part of a team and a company and everything like that, they also need to see a vision, right? Having a plan gives people confidence. And I've seen people with a lot of, so much passion really stop showing up simply because they didn't know what step to take next. So this is where a lot of companies I'll work with, I'll make sure that they do check-ins, whether it's quarterly or it's even, for some people, biannually. And some people, it's only once a year. But that feedback, the positive feedback, what's working, what's not working, where they want to go, and just really asking our team, asking the people that are in our company, what is it that you do want, and why, and how we can support you. And when I was in different leadership roles, this allowed me to honestly create roles based on people's strengths and based on areas as the business was growing. And so when we have that clarity as a leader, and whether you're leading a company or you're just in a leadership role in, part of a business, we all are leaders in our own way. When we are clear on our path, that creates really good momentum. And I look at them as different chapters. And when I reflect back to my early years in my 20s in leadership versus then when I was getting married and had kids to now where I'm at in my life and my career, is that nothing is forever. So if we set a goal for the year, for 3 years, we can really focus on hitting that and then come up for air and say, okay, what's this next chapter of 3, 4, 5 years going to be about? And so we want to help anybody that we're working with, and ourselves included, to just break things down. And so whether that is for yourself or your team, simplify the next move. So yes, we want to know what it is that we want and why we want it, but simplify what that looks like. Okay. I often will say in a lot of strategy sessions I do with people in business that it's almost like you're in the car and you want to get to the beach, and people are at the beach and we see them at the beach and that beach looks really amazing. We just actually don't know how to take our car. We don't know how to get there. There's no map. And so what we want to do is we want to be able to create a roadmap so that we can focus on the next step, not the whole, staircase, for example. So if we know that we have to drive our car from A to B and then B to C and then C to D, that's a lot easier to do than just starting to go and have no idea where we're going. That's where we run out of gas. That's where we get lost. That's where the car breaks down. And we can avoid that by really just making a plan and an action map of how to get to where we want to go. And so when people know what to do, they are far less likely to bail. Number 6 is that people quit when they aren't being challenged or celebrated. Now, this one might surprise you. And sometimes people quit not because it's too hard, but because it's not engaging enough. So if people feel like they're doing the same thing over and over without growth or recognition, apathy creeps in. And so what I have found is that people that stay engaged when they're stretched, they'll stay engaged when they're stretched and they're seen. And so the strategy for this is to set goals that stretch people just past their comfort zone. Oftentimes when I'm helping people with goal setting, I'll ask them what their goals are, because we don't ever want to project a goal on somebody. Now, sometimes in sales companies, in different types of businesses I work with, yes, we have to give people goals. So they do have benchmarks to hit for sure for the job or KPIs. But oftentimes when we give the opportunity for people to set their goals, they will actually push themselves sometimes further than we might. And so we want to celebrate their efforts, not just their outcomes, because then people will feel sometimes if they're only being celebrated by hitting just the goal, that they're still not good enough. So when they're working hard, they're doing the effort to help them be on pace to hit that goal. That's something that we can celebrate too as leaders. And then just showing them how far they've come. I had a client that I was working with yesterday who jumped on our coaching session and was like, I haven't done anything since we last talked. And we meet twice a month. And when I had an opportunity to ask the right questions and look at their coaching prep form and look at some of the wins, I reminded this person that they had actually accomplished a lot. And that sometimes when we're high achievers, we don't ever feel like it's good enough. And so it is important for us to whether it's for ourselves or in a leadership role, to really show people the growth they've had, because there's lots of different quotes out there. But I love the one that says the person that was you 5 years ago would look at the person today and just be super proud, because we're not the same person that we were 5 years ago. And so we have grown in different ways. And so how do we do that in our lives, in our companies, in leadership roles, so that we can really recognize and stay encouraged, okay, and prevent ourselves from quitting? And sometimes just even a small word of encouragement can really reroute someone who was about to quit. And knowing your people, because everybody is, again, motivated differently, but they also like to be recognized differently too. Number 7 is people quit because quitting is easier than facing their fears. When I used to teach sales training, I used to say that fear had 2 meanings, right? Forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. And let's get really real. Starting a business and leading a team, going after your dreams, it brings up everything. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of success. I had a coaching call earlier today where I shared this quote or this phrase or this analogy that talks about people only get recognized for what they do in the spotlight, or people are in the spotlight for what they're doing well, but it's what people do behind the scenes that really matters, right? And there's a lot of things, if you look at anyone that's successful, that have to be done to get somebody to this place of success. And so when fear feels too big, okay, quitting does become a safety blanket, and it gives people an out before they ever had to find out what they're really made of. And so, what I've found is that fear is rarely the end, it's the threshold. And so if you can help someone walk through it instead of run from it, they find power on the other side. And I would always say that when you don't give up, that's when things get really good, right? Getting through those hard bumps in business, even relationships, right? When we don't give up, right? It's always a lot better and stronger on the other side. And so asking ourselves, what's really stopping you? Or what would you do if fear wasn't in the room? And that conversation can definitely be the difference between quitting and quantum leaping. And number 8 is people quit when they don't see themselves as a leader. And this one's really personal for me. I spent a lot of time thinking, who am I to lead? Even when I was already doing it. And what I found is that people will quit when they don't believe they're capable of carrying the vision forward. And so they think leadership is for someone else, more polished, more extroverted, more experienced. But leadership is learned. And so the shift is calling it out in others. And I would often instill confidence in people by saying things like, you have what it takes. Oh, with the way that you made that decision, that's the reason you're going to make a great leader one day. Or that's the reason you already are a leader. Sometimes people need to borrow belief until they can own it. So as a leader, when we're thinking ahead and we are knowing exactly where we want to grow our business to, when we can do that for other people, that actually allows us to create the success that we want by believing in other people. And as I wrap up today, here's the truth, is quitting isn't a personality flaw. It's a response to pain, confusion, fear, or disconnection. So as a coach, a leader, and a builder of big dreams, you have the power to change that for your team, for your clients, and for yourself. And so your challenge this week is think about somebody who might be at the edge of quitting. Maybe a client, a team member, maybe it's even you. Reach out and ask what they need. Lead with empathy, not just strategy, because sometimes the difference between quitting and continuing is simply knowing someone believes in you. So DM me on Instagram at Shayla Wey Coaching and tell me, what have you almost quit but are choosing to keep going with today? And if this episode helped you, leave a review, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and hit subscribe so that we can grow together. Keep dreaming, keep building, and never forget, you're closer than you think.